Hello, I'm John Beatty. Welcome to Cask to Glass, the whisky podcast where I explore the heritage and flavour of Scotland's national drink and the world's favourite spirit. Now, in this episode, I'm back again, the award-winning Piper Whisky Bar in Glasgow. My guest is Robin Laing, the Whisky Bard, a well-kent face on the global whisky scene.
All it took was one sip of the water of life.
Robin Laing, hello.
Hello, John. Nice
Thank
to
you.
meet you.
A pleasure. Thank you for coming in on a dreich Glasgow morning.
I know. Happy to come into Glasgow. It's a rare thing for me. I'm more of an Edinburgh man, you know.
Oh, are you?
I'm afraid so.
Where would we be in Scotland without humour, eh?
I know.
Edinburgh.
That's good. Yeah.
Before we get going, how do you take your whiskey?
Well, because I'm normally drinking cask strength whiskey, I usually try it neat and then almost always add a wee drop of water.
Right.
And that's it. Unless I'm drinking bourbon, then I would put ice in it.
Why are you almost always drinking cask strength whiskey? Why?
I've been a member of the Scotch Malt Whisky Society for decades. In fact, I've been on the tasting panel for 27 years or something. And of course, all their whiskey is single cask, and it's at natural strength. So that's kind of what I'm used to. Because I do some of their tasting notes, part of my payment is in whiskey. So I don't have to buy whiskey very often. It's there in the house, but it's nearly all cask strength.
Just explain the words cask strength. What does that mean?
It's just the natural strength that the whiskey comes out of the cask when it's bottled, so it's not been reduced. Most of the normal, certainly all the blends and most of the single malts that you might buy in the shops will have been reduced from the natural strength to, I think the most common strength is 40% alcohol, sometimes 43, sometimes increasingly 46 is a sort of magic number. Don't want to get too technical about it, but of course when whiskey's made, when it comes off the still, it's quite often round about 70% alcohol, and in one or two distilleries they might put it in the cask at that strength. Usually it's reduced, it's a sort of industry standard, they reduce it to 63.5. Then, of course, the angels get a go at it. So the longer you mature the whiskey, the more the angels are taking their share. And in Scotland, sadly, they tend to take the alcohol more than the water content, so the alcoholic strength goes down. So it depends how long the whiskey's been in the cask, but alcoholic strength is usually, well, that's 57.3.
Right.
So between 55 and 60 is kind of normal for something like a 10-year-old single malt.
So there we go. There's the bottle. And so when you taste cask strength,
Yeah.
what's the difference?
Well, the obvious difference is it's got more alcohol, so that it tends to have a little bit more burn, I would say, you know, because you're feeling the alcohol when as soon as it goes in your mouth, and then when you swallow it, you do feel the burn in many cases, especially if it's over 60%, which it can be. So I like to try it like that, just to be sure, just to get a sense of what it's like, and also an idea of how much water I might want to add to it. You might do like the Germans do with a little pipette and one drop, or you might put a splash in. It depends.
Having done the tasting notes, I mean, you must have tasted some glorious whiskies.
Okay, yeah, definitely.
Which ones, you know, having done all these tasting notes and having tasted so many of these whiskies, which ones do you remember and go, do you know, I remember that one?
Yeah.
That's the one. Or that's the two.
Well, there are one or two specific whiskies that I do remember. I remember having the opportunity to taste a 40-year-old Bowmore when I was in Tokyo at a whiskey festival, and I've tasted Black Bowmore in Lucerne in Switzerland. These are memorable drams, not just because they're Bowmore, but because they are old and very expensive. But I found that my tastes have changed a bit over the years. You know, 20 years ago, when I was at the Malt Whisky Society tasting all the different samples. I think I was into, the big smoky whiskies, the peat, the peat beasts and the sherry monsters, things with lots of intense flavours. But over the years, I think I've shifted slightly. I'm still lucky. I like all different styles of whiskey. There's none that I don't want to have anything to do with. You do find people sometimes saying, I don't like the sherry ones, I don't like the peaty ones. But I've grown more affectionate for the older Speyside whiskies, 25, 30-year-old Longmorns and Benriachs and things like that. These are the whiskies now that get my mojo jumping.
See, that's interesting. So, the 40-year-old Bowmore and then these 20-odd-year-old Speysides, how would you describe them? When you took this 40-year-old Bowmore and you think, I remember that. How was it? How would you say it? How was it?
It was unexpected, first of all. I mean, you do feel slightly honoured. I remember that particular tasting, they had the 40-year-old Bowmore, they had a 41-year-old Auchentoshan that was from that company. And I was there as a musician. And I said to the organisers, is there any chance there's a spare seat for me to join in? Oh, definitely not. That's, very expensive. People are paying hundreds of dollars for that. Yeah. But then Kenny Mackay, who was the managing director or CEO at Bowmore at that time, came up to me and said, I'm presenting this thing, Robin, with a new video and the tasting. Would you introduce me? And I said, yeah, can I sit in? Yeah, no problem. So I managed to get in the back door, so I was already feeling a little bit honoured to be able to taste these whiskies. But of course, we've all tasted 12-year-old, 15-year-old Bowmores, and there's a fair bit of smoke in them. Not a huge amount, because I would say Bowmore is a kind of medium level peatedness of the Isle of whiskies. But the 40-year-old, you were struggling to find the smoke. It had been, softened. It had been ameliorated. It had drifted down. It was just a background wisp of smoke. And what you were getting instead was all these exotic fruits.
Really?
Tropical flavours,
Really? From an Isle of malt?
Yeah. So I was astonished by that and annoyed that I would never be able to taste it again because I can't afford it.
I mean, you travel all over the world, don't you, to whiskey events?
Pretty much, mostly Europe, but I do sometimes go further afield.
Where do you go? What do you do?
At the moment, mostly I'm in Germany, Switzerland, occasionally Norway, but these are my main go-to places. It's just something I've built up over, 20 years. I've been going to Switzerland and Germany and making friends with people in the whiskey world, the whiskey circuit, and performing at annual events. So for some reason, sometimes they ask me back again.
I looked at your forward diary. They ask you back a lot, don't they? I mean, you're all over the place. As you say, Europe, you go to America.
I go sometimes in America.
Canada.
Yeah, I was in America 2023 with the Scotch Malt Whisky Society doing 6 cities and 6 nights. That was crazy. Last year I was in Canada for the New Brunswick Spirits Festival, and they've asked me to come back again this year. That will be in November, and that's a big festival. And obviously it's not just. I mean, it's mainly whiskey. It's called a Spirits Festival, and you will get gins and things sneaking in there, but it's mainly whiskey. But it's not just Scotch whiskey, so you get all the Canadian and the American whiskies as well. But I would say, I mean, the thing's run by a guy called Frank Scott. So it's primarily, inspired by Scotch whiskey. Yeah.
And when you get up and play your guitar and sing, because I know you've written books about whiskey, but you've got a poetry book out just now.
Yeah, not about whiskey.
No, to do with castles.
Yeah.
And you're very much the performing artist. You do cruise ships.
I do.
What happens there, cruise ships?
Well, this is a cruise ship that goes round visiting the islands of Scotland. So say it starts off in Glasgow or Greenock, then it will visit various islands up the west coast. Then when it gets to Shetland, it doesn't stop anywhere else between Shetland and Edinburgh. It comes into Rosyth. So that's a day at sea. And so the customers, the clients, they don't get to go ashore anywhere.
Right.
So a whole day at sea is a little, there's a danger that could become boring. So that's where I come in. I give them a whiskey tasting and talk about the whiskey and sing a few songs to entertain them as well. And that can be fun at 11 o'clock in the morning with a ship going like that,
But that must be a beautiful sail. If it goes up the west coast, from Greenock up the west, then up to Shetland, which if no one's been to Shetland, is the most stunning of places, isn't it?
It is amazing. They're all amazing.
They're all amazing.
And
then down the east coast to Rosyth.
Yeah,
it's beautiful.
the thing that amazes me is it doesn't call into Islay. It goes to
the
Mull.
Whiskey Island.
No, it goes to Mull. It goes to Skye. It goes to Stornoway, Orkney, Shetland. But at the moment, anyway, it doesn't call into Islay.
Do you know, there probably isn't a big enough port. That'll be the issue, isn't it?
Well,
you've got Portellen, Portaskeg.
Yeah, maybe the ports are too busy. I don't know.
Too busy with the ferries.
Yeah, I don't know what the reason is. Some of these enormous cruise ships, I see them up in Shetland. Mm-hmm. They can't get in anywhere. They send tenders. The people go by shuttle boat, if you like.
Right.
So they could do that, but maybe they're afraid that the Americans, it's mostly American, customers.
Yeah.
Because it's an American company called Tauk that run these cruises. Maybe they're afraid if the Americans get ashore on Islay, they'll never be able to round them up again.
Well, they'll never go home again.
Yeah, it could be.
I mean, can you imagine if you went to Islay for the first time and you've got all the distilleries, you would never go home, would you?
I spend quite a lot of time on Islay, and my family as well, and they're not into whiskey. I think the great thing about Islay, obviously it's an attraction for whiskey lovers. Mm. I mean, people make pilgrimages from all over the world to Islay. There's no question about it. But actually, as an island, it's got a lot more going for it than just the whiskey. So, you can have a weekend, you can have a week, you can have 2 weeks on Islay and never run out of things to do. And it doesn't really matter what the weather is.
We weren't going to talk about Islay. I didn't know you go to Islay a lot. We go to Islay every summer. We love it. Lovely place. We'll get back to that episode in a second, but the best free way you can support the podcast is just hit the thumbs up button on this video and subscribe so you get new episodes every week. It also helps lots more people find the podcast. So thank you. When you're on the ships and you're playing your guitar and you brought this lovely acoustic along, a kind of Spanish acoustic,
Chinese Spanish.
What do you sing? Could you give us a wee blast of something that you would sing?
Yeah, well...
And what you say, what you talk about.
First of all, I select the whiskies. And because it's a tour around the islands and the coast, I'll select whiskies that represent the journey. So there might be whiskies from, Talisker, obviously, from Skye, Highland Park, from Orkney, and so on. So I'll choose the whiskies to fit the journey, and then I try to choose the songs to fit the whiskies, which up to a certain extent I can. So I've got a song about Talisker, I've got songs about Arran whiskey, I've got songs about Bruichladdich, many songs about Bruichladdich, about Bowmore, and so on. So I can do that, but in amongst that, I will put in some songs that are more generally about whiskey in Scotland. And they're quite interested in Robert Burns as well, so I usually throw in one or two Robert Burns whiskey songs. Or if I'm actually doing a Burns supper, which seems a bit odd to do a Burns supper in May or September, but, why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
Why not celebrate? Why
Absolutely.
Not? Would you give us a blast of something that you do?
Okay, so one of the songs that I usually put in is called Building Bridges, because it's a song that during the lockdown, I was approached by a friend who has a whiskey company in Germany, and he said, because you're a musician and this is the lockdown, you're not making any money. He said, I'm still making money because people are still drinking whiskey. Would you write some songs for me, for my company, and I'll pay you? And I thought, well, okay, I'll give it a try. I'm not doing anything else. And I asked him about, what's your mission statement? Oh, he said, I'm based in Germany, importing Scotch whisky, selling it to the Germans, and they all fall in love with Scotland. I'm building a bridge between Germany and Scotland. And I loved that idea of whiskey building bridges. So I wrote a song called Building Bridges, and it became the first track on an album that we made called Up in the Dram Room. So I'll give you a little bit of that. Start maybe the chorus in one verse or something like that. Yeah. Building bridges, joining hands, making links from land to land. Whiskey helps us understand that shibboleths can fall. Come on, friend, fill your glass. Let's toast the future, not the past. Let's build something good to last. Take steps, however small. Let's build bridges, let's stop building walls. Our countries may be far apart, but the same love lies in our hearts. Love for the alchemy and the art to find the perfect dram. Come on, friend, let's drink to that. To whiskey makers, we'll raise our hats, for they are our country's diplomats. And here's the master plan: to join our nations in a whiskey clan, building bridges, joining hands, etc., etc.
You got a good voice.
Not bad for 72 years old.
You're not 72.
I am 72, yeah. And it's a bit unfair, actually, for you to ask a septuagenarian on a early in the morning, a whiskey drinker at that, to sing. But
you're not 72.
Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah.
What pills do you take?
Whiskey, the water of life.
The water, uisge.
Yeah.
Is that right? That was great.
What's the famous old quotation? If you could just find out the exact proper quantities of whiskey to drink every day, you would never need doctors at all, and you might live forever.
I know, it's medicine, isn't it? It's medicine.
It is the cure for which there is no disease.
Oh, goodness me. So all right, so the cruises must be fun. And it strikes me you have you like life, you enjoy life.
I
right?
do, yeah.
You enjoy life. You've got a smile, you enjoy your whiskey, you enjoy your music. So when you're with all the people and you're on a boat or you're talking about whiskey, what do you tell them about whiskey? What do you say? How do you explain whiskey?
Well, they're in Scotland, and I mean, clearly whiskey is one of the most important Scottish products, exports. It brings in a vast amount of money to the British economy and a lot of jobs in Scotland. I mean, it's amazing how many new distilleries are springing up now. Mind you, that's not just in Scotland, that's everywhere. And one has to worry that, the boom and bust thing might end up in a bad place, but we'll wait and see. So far, it's okay. And I tell them that whiskey is somehow it's an essence of Scotland. There's one of my songs has a verse in it that's actually been put on the wall at Clynelish Distillery. And you hold it in your hand, it's the pulse of one small nation, so much more than just a dram. You can see it, if you will, the people and the weather and the land, the past into the present is distilled. So there's something about that's why I have a passion for whiskey. I mean, I drink wine a lot, but it's not the same. I have a passion for Scotch whiskey.
Do you?
Oh, yeah. And to me, it's the history, it's the culture of whiskey. And it somehow reflects not just the landscape and the things that we can grow. I mean, we can't grow vineyards.
No. True.
So we have to make the best with what we have. But it also somehow reflects the people, There's something hard about Scottish people, but we've had centuries of being not very wealthy, I suppose, as a country, but we've made the best of it, and so many things we've given to the world as well, apart from whiskey. All the inventions that were made by Scottish engineers and scientists and so on. So it's quite fascinating, and I think whiskey, to me, it has a dual property. It allows you to, if you drink whiskey, sometimes it makes you relax. it's a down whiskey. I don't want to say it's a downer, but it does.
It's a relaxant.
It's a relaxant. It brings you down.
You don't take an angry whiskey, do you?
No.
You don't drink whiskey as an angry
But
thing.
it can also fire you up. It's like the troops taking espresso coffee before going into battle. Give them a dram of that instead. So it has that amazing ability to relax you, but to fire you up depending on the situation in which you drink it.
Mm. Yeah, I'm conscious that you love Scottish music as well, don't you? Because
yes.
Where did that love come from in terms of music and getting out there singing songs about your country and writing books about castles and where did that come from?
I guess like a lot of Scottish people, I love stories and I love to hear stories and I love to tell stories. And I think I have to say there was never any music really in my family. I don't come from a musical family. But when I was a teenager, I started to get interested in classical music on the one hand and folk music on the other hand. So I was a great fan of the Corries, for example. Yeah. And that got me interested enough in the folk traditions of Scotland that when I went to Edinburgh University in my early 20s, I went to study sociology, which has nothing to do with music. But in my second year, I took an extra course at the School of Scottish Studies with people like Hamish Henderson. And so I got deeper and deeper into the folk tradition, if you like, the oral culture of Scotland. And anybody who gets at all into that area becomes fascinated. It's very rich. It's a very rich tradition. Scotland has very rich musical traditions for various instruments, and especially in my case, for the song and the old ballads and so on.
Well, I was lucky enough to meet one half of the Corries because it was Ronnie Brown, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. Ronnie was an extraordinary vocalist. He wasn't a guitarist, though, was he? He learnt guitar late, but if you think of the influence on our culture of those two men, it's extraordinary, isn't it, the Corries?
I think they were amazing in many ways. I mean, first of all, they were musically very competent. Yeah. Whatever you say about Ronnie coming late, they played this kind of guitar.
Yes, he said he came late. I'm not saying he was he was a brilliant guitarist, brilliant vocalist. He said he came late.
Brilliant, and Roy was a great songwriter as well, as you know, Flower of Scotland and so on. But they also had this thing that is very much part of what I do when I present to the cruise ships. They would combine very serious lyrical love songs and historical songs about ballads and difficult times in the past, but then they would suddenly go into some bawdy song about the bantam cock, and so the humour always had a part with the Corries, and I think that's part of the Scottish thing. It's there with Robert Burns as well. There's humour as well as the serious.
I know you do an alternative Burns supper, don't you, with a few bawdy songs?
Well, I've never done one before, but I've committed to doing one this weekend in Switzerland.
You're doing an alternative Burns supper in Switzerland?
Yeah.
Using or borrowing some bawdy Burns songs?
Oh, yeah, from the Merry Muses of Caledonia, the stuff that until very recently was never included in the collected works of Robert Burns that you would buy in the bookshops.
How bawdy is it?
It's pretty. I mean, it not only has fish words, it has chip words as well. So,
oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And songs like Nae Hair on It, The Fornicator, 9-inch Will Please a Lady, and all that sort of stuff. I mean, this is the kind of songs that he would have written and performed for his men friends at the Crochallen Fencibles,
Right.
Yeah, serious, dirty stuff.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know how Switzerland's going to cope with this. They might show me on the next plane home. I don't know.
On the next boat home. I didn't know that. Hands up, I didn't know there was that stuff. But okay.
I was involved quite a few years ago, in making a CD of those songs. Mm-hmm. A guy called Crawford Mackey in Fife had the idea to get some singers together. So with me and Jill Bowman and Davy Steele, Titch Freer and some other folk, we made an album of a number of these bawdy songs, if you like.
With fish and chips?
Aye, absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely.
I love telling the amazing story of Scotland's whisky industry and sharing some positivity about one of the incredible things this country has given the world. Now, if you want to share some positivity too, leave us a 5-star rating wherever you are listening to the podcast. It takes you 10 seconds and will help Cask to Glass reach a much, much wider audience. Can we steer it back to whiskey then, away from the fish and chips? How did you get your name on a bottle of Bruichladdich? What happened here?
I had a good relationship with the guys at Bruichladdich for many years. They reopened the distillery in 2001. And one of the master distiller was Jim McEwen, who had been at Bowmore before that. And I was friendly with Jim and with Mark Rainey, the managing director, and I would be invited over regularly for events and for the Isla Festival and so on. And I was so inspired by what they were doing at the time that I wrote a number of songs. So when they reached their 10-year anniversary, they asked me to make a CD of some of the songs that I'd written. And they said, why don't we bottle a cask as well? So they gave me a cask of whiskey. And it was called Robin Laing Bruichladdich Inspiration.
I see that. Robin's Spanish Inspiration.
Well, that's a more recent one.
All right, okay.
The original one was from a port cask. And unfortunately, before they got a chance to give me a second cask, the company was taken over by Remy Cointreau, French company, and they said no more casks for anybody, you know. But my friend Thomas Evers in Germany, Malts of Scotland, he has a huge number of whiskey casks, many of them Bruichladdich or Port Charlotte, which is the same distillery. And he said, well, let's do some more. So we've actually done, I think I'm on cask number 8 or 9 now of Bruichladdich with my name on it. So this particular one was from a Spanish cask, Pedro Jimenez cask. So we called it Robin's Spanish Inspiration.
Wow. 57.3% by volume.
Aye.
He said, smiling. He said, can we smell it?
You can drink it.
Can we drink it?
Aye.
Can we?
Yeah. I didn't dare bring a full
that's
bottle.
Very sherry, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's pour this. Let's listen to the noise.
So the thing about most sherry matured whiskies these days are finished. So, you know, they'll spend a few years, maybe 10 years in bourbon cask, and then they change it, shift it into a sherry cask to give it that extra maturation, that complexity. But these ones have been matured only in sherry. So this one I think is 12 or 13 years old, it doesn't quite say. But all that time it's been in a Pedro Jimenez sherry cask.
Really?
Yeah.
So when you taste a whiskey, and this is obviously your whiskey, when you taste a whiskey, what are you thinking when you taste a whiskey?
It depends whether I'm drinking it for fun or, for professional reasons, because I do write tasting notes for the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. Yeah. So that's a slightly different process then. Mm-hmm. Which are you more interested in?
Both. I'd like both. Just how do you do it? How do you analyze a whiskey?
Okay, so if I'm doing it professionally.
Let's take this one, yeah.
Yeah, so first of all, I would nose it, and because you know it's cask strength, so you don't want to stick your snout right in case you get the burn, you know. Yeah. But of nosing, because the smell of the whiskey, I would say, is a good part of the pleasure of drinking whiskey. Mm-hmm. And you try to identify what you can from the whiskey, what notes you're getting in there. A lot of whiskey drinking for me is memory of flavours and tastes and aromas that I've had through my life, or quite often, especially when I was a child, you know.
Really?
Because as a child, I drank a lot, I ate a lot of sweets. And so quite often when you smell a whiskey, for me, this, for example, there's a bit of wood in there. I do get quite a bit of wood notes. So if you go to whiskey warehouse or a bodega in Spain, you're going to get that kind of smell from the oak, the wine-soaked oak. But I'm also getting something like a fruit cake, maybe a Christmas cake, the dried fruits, the sweetness.
Wow.
The sweetness, of course, mainly comes from the barley. And sometimes you do smell, you taste barley sugars, but it can be any kind of.
Do you know, every time I stick it to my nose, I get a different hint, I get different notes.
Because it's complex, and also it will change over time. So the volatile aromas that come off first, you come back to the whiskey 15 minutes later, and it's different. And even if once you've finished it, once you've drunk it, you can go back to the empty glass sometime later, and you smell something different again. And the French have a word for that. They call it estre sec.
Something dry. What does that mean, estre sec?
Extract.
Oh, extra sec.
But the first time I heard that, Martine Nuet, another whiskey writer, and I would say she's an expert, lived on Islay for a long time, but she's back in France now. She told me the brandy drinkers, they know about this thing, the estre sec. And I didn't hear her quite well because we were in a loud place. Are you saying extra sex? No. Estre sec. I thought, what? Estre sec? No. Eventually I got it.
That's
I'm not
some night, isn't it? Whiskey tasting and a bit of extra sex. That's quite.
Well, yeah. Don't get me on to talking about whiskey as Viagra.
No, we'll not.
Okay.
Do you think it is?
Well, you can be playful about it, but one of my songs that I wrote about all the distilleries of Speyside, the last line is Balvenie is Viagra in a glass.
Is that right? Do it. Can you do it? Can you sing that?
No, because I'd have to retune the guitar.
It's an open tuning, is it? Balvenie.
But that was a book that I wrote of about all the Speyside distilleries. It's called The Whisky River. And it was meant to be travelling all around Speyside in the footsteps of Alfred Barnard, who wrote a fantastic book about the distilleries of Britain in the 1880s. So I thought I'll go and see how many of these distilleries are still there and compare and contrast. So there's more than 50 distilleries in Speyside. Yeah. So it's a hard job. Somebody's got to do it. Visiting all these distilleries.
You went to them all?
Oh, yeah. And tasting a lot of the whiskies as well. And I thought, while I'm going round, I'll see if I can write a song that gets all the whiskey distilleries in. So I did manage it. And that was the last line. Balvenie, Viagra in a glass. Because we all know about the medicinal properties of whiskey.
Yes. What are they? Just, you're not a fully qualified doctor, neither am I, but what do you think they are?
There's a lovely piece that was written in Holinshed's book many centuries ago about all the wonderful things that can happen to you if you drink whiskey. But for me, the way I see it is that whiskey is the cure for which there is no disease.
Yes. Yes.
You don't need to be sick. It'll still make you feel better.
It's been brilliant to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming in. And maybe we should end on I know I'm speaking to you before you're going to go abroad again.
Yeah.
You've got books out. You've got your own bit of whiskey. You love whiskey. No, before you go then, and before you sing your song, you thought there was a bit of turbulence in the whiskey world. But I wonder if maybe, when I was born, the population of the world was 3 billion. And we're heading now 8-9 billion. So I'm hopeful that the world will be a good place despite what's happening in the world just now, and there will be great space for whiskey. But you think there's a bit of turbulence, do you?
No. I'm aware from. I'm not an economist, but I'm aware from history that the whiskey industry in Scotland has tended to have its periods of overproduction and then collapse, or at least times when lots of distilleries have had to close. And at the moment, we're on a boom.
Yeah.
Lots of the distilleries are, increasing production. New distilleries coming up everywhere. I mean, they're all over the place. And so you see that trajectory and you wonder how long can that go? And for a while, people were saying, well, we're opening up the new markets, in India and China and South America and so on. But as we discovered from the first time when Donald Trump was president, that it's very easy for other countries to put tariffs on, for example, and suddenly, the export figures can change drastically. And whiskey's a difficult thing to make and sell because you need, for good whiskey, you need 10 years. I know you can use it and sell it after 3 or 4 years. 3 years is the legal limit. But to make a good whiskey, you're going to need 10 to 15 years. And it's very difficult to plan that far in advance. How do you know whether to double your production or not, And production of whiskey involves a lot of fixed costs. You've got all your property costs, your staff costs, your barley costs, your energy costs. These are all things that are not only fixed, but they take energy, for example. The cost of energy can go up really significantly. The war in Ukraine affected the energy prices and the barley price. So these are things that it's difficult 10 years down the line to anticipate. So it's not easy making whiskey. I'm quite happy just to drink it.
Robin, I've loved talking to you. It's been an eye opener. Thank you, and I'd wish you.
Thanks for inviting
me. Wish you health and good luck, and as you say, it's the cure for which you need no disease. Would you do us a wee song or a bit of a song?
A bit of a song. How about one of the Robert Burns whisky songs?
On the first flat. Here we go.
Willie brewed a peckle malt.
Okay.
Of course, Willie, Robin, Alan, and Willie, the three. Rob was Robert Burns. They were having a night drinking whiskey, and they it became a competition, and they decided that the rules of the competition, this is in the last verse of the song, were the first one to get up and leave the table to go home is a coward and a cuckold, but the first one to fall unconscious drunk under the table is the winner. So I'll see if I can do a chorus and maybe the last verse. Oh, Willie brewed a peck o' malt, and Rob and Alan come to pray. 3 blither hearts that lie lang nicht you wouldn't find in Christendie. For we are nae foo, we're nae that foo, it's just a drappie and hoorie. Oh, the cock may craw, the day may daw, but I will taste the barley brie. Oh, first shall rise to gang awa, a cuckold coward loon is he. Oh, first beside his chair shall fall, he is the king among us 3. Oh, we are nae foo, we're nae that foo, it's just a drappie and hoorie. Oh, the cock may craw, the day may daw, but I will taste the barley brie.
Brilliant. And for people who don't know, the Scots, we're no foo means we're not drunk.
We're not drunk. It's not the French foo.
It's not foo. And a drap in the E is just, we're not drunk, we just put a tiny wee drop of whiskey in our eye. It's just
or it just brings a little glint to our eye.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Oh, I see. Brilliant. Robin, thank you.
Good to meet you.
We're never going home. We're never going home. Can we stay with you in Scotland for the rest of our lives?